A very warm welcome to you who is joining us for this session online. My name is Luciano, and I welcome you to the welcome orientation session for newcomers. This session is intended to provide information to newcomers who have recently arrived in Canada, sponsored either by a relative or a church community through the Archdiocese of Toronto. I will be discussing a number of topics, including providing you information about the Office for Refugees, Archdiocese of Toronto, or RAT. I will also discuss about your source of financial support during your sponsorship. I will also explain about your rights and responsibilities as a newcomer in Canada. And we will discuss about the opportunity to move and travel, whether within Canada or outside of Canada. And you will also learn about the supports that you're supposed to receive from your sponsors during your period of sponsorship year. We will also talk about how to manage conflict. Inevitably, in any relations, there may be conflict that can arise, and it's important to know how to manage that conflict. I will also show you some very important documents that you need to ensure you have in your possession as a newcomer, which will ensure that you have a foundational basis in which to be able to launch yourself forward with the rest of your life in Canada. And so let's get started on it. First, about the Office for Refugees of the Archdiocese of Toronto. The Office for Refugees of the Archdiocese of Toronto is a department of the Catholic Archdiocese of Toronto. And the Archdiocese of Toronto is a sponsorship agreement holder, or what we call as a SAH, SAH. The Office for Refugees, which is a department within the Archdiocese of Toronto, administers the sponsorship agreement of the Archdiocese of Toronto to ensure that the sponsors with which we partner to do sponsorship are in compliance with Immigration Canada requirements related to the resettlement of refugees in Canada. All sponsorship agreement holders are incorporated organizations that have signed a formal agreement with Immigration Canada, and which enables them to sponsor refugees that they identify or name to be able to resettle in Canada. We are not a government agency, nor are we a non-governmental organization. Most sponsorship agreement holders, including the Archdiocese of Toronto, tend to be either religious organizations or they are ethno-cultural groups or humanitarian organizations such as settlement agencies that provide sponsorship to refugees that they name and identify. Most of the sponsorship agreement holders are either local, regional, or national in nature, and they assume full responsibility for the management of the sponsorships under their agreement. Currently, there are about 138 sponsorship agreement holders across Canada. But within the Greater Toronto Area, there may be about 25 or more, depending on any number that are approved by Immigration Canada to be engaged in this work. The sponsorship agreement holders work hand in hand with partner individuals or groups who enable them to fulfill their mandate of sponsoring refugees. And these partners are what we call as constituent groups or co-sponsors. Each sponsorship agreement holder sets its own criteria by which it can formalize a partnership with any of these entities that it chooses to work with. And therefore, the role of these partner groups or individuals that it partners with is to share in the delivery of settlement assistance to the newcomers that they resettle to Canada. Therefore, all partner groups or individuals are expected to sign a sponsorship undertaking and discharge the responsibilities that are agreed upon in the sponsorship undertaking and the settlement plan. The sponsor partners, which can be either the groups or the individuals, are expected to be the place where the refugees will be expected to resettle upon arrival in Canada. Now, in our case, our office is located at 830 Bathurst Street in Toronto, Ontario. The closest intersection is Bloor Street West and Bathurst Street intersection, just opposite from Bathurst subway station. Now, some of you may ask how our activities financed and supported. The work of the Office for Refugees of the Archdiocese of Toronto is supported through primarily the contributions of parishioners, members of the parish church communities within the Archdiocese of Toronto. And that work is primarily done through the work of Share Life, which is a fundraising agency of the Archdiocese of Toronto, supporting the work of over 40 agencies that provide support to vulnerable groups of people within the Archdiocese of Toronto, and the Office for Refugees is one of those that benefits from the funds that are received through Share Life. We also receive sometimes occasional donations from individual donors or anonymous donors who appreciate our work and provide support towards that effort. However, it's important for newcomers to know that there is no financial support that comes from the government of Canada to our office. Therefore, all the financials that are provided to the newcomers either come from the Archdiocese of Toronto directly or from the individuals that we partner with to sponsor the refugees. As I indicated in the previous slide, there are two different types of sponsorships that we undertake. The first kind is what we call as the family linked cases. These are refugees who have been identified and brought to our attention by their relatives who would like to bring them to Canada through our sponsorship agreement. And therefore, we enter into an agreement and partner with them so that the family members become co-sponsors. And these family members then in turn provide financial and other non-financial supports that are required by the government of Canada to the refugees that they would eventually sponsor through our office. The other category of refugees that are sponsored by our office, what we call as the non-linked, non-family linked cases or refugees. These are refugees who have no relatives or friends in Canada, and our office, through its mission trips to various refugee camps overseas, sometimes I comes across families that are most desperate in need and have no durable solution to their situation. Therefore, in turn, those types of families are identified by our office, and we then raise funds through our church groups and communities, individual donors, and these monies which are donated and then put in a pool which would then be used to sponsor and support these refugees. The main vehicle primarily that we have been using for this purpose is what we call the Project Hope initiative, which is a campaign to assist and support refugees who have no hope whatsoever to find a new place here within the Archdiocese of Toronto, and the parish communities within the Archdiocese of Toronto take the responsibility of looking after and journeying with these newcomers upon arrival in Canada. So some of you, the newcomers who are watching and participating in this presentation, may have been sponsored through this option of resettlement through our office. Therefore, it's very prudent that we ensure that any funds that are raised for particularly supporting these types of refugees are used in a prudent manner. Okay. Now, I indicated that I would like to also discuss about the rights of the newcomers that we sponsor. By virtue of the newcomers arriving in Canada, they automatically are landed and become permanent residents. A permanent resident is someone who has been given permanent residence status by Immigration Canada, but they are not yet a Canadian citizen. And so you, the newcomers, are now permanent residents. You have been granted permanent residence status through your application process, and upon landing at the airport, you became permanent residents. Permanent residents generally are citizens of another country or other countries, and they are resettled from overseas to Canada. In some situations, for refugees who make a claim within Canada, they become permanent residents after their claim has been approved, and then they apply for permanent residence status before they become permanent residents. However, with the private sponsorship of refugees program, the refugees whom we sponsor from overseas, upon undergoing all the necessary processing required and checks and verifications done by Immigration Canada, these refugees arrive at the airport and they are landed as permanent residents right away. So therefore, they are conferred the permanent resident status on arrival. Permanent residents have full protections under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and also under Canadian law. Permanent residents have the right of movement within and outside of Canada. Of course, there are certain limits that I will talk about a little bit later on in terms of movement, especially within and outside of Canada for permanent residents who are sponsored and within still their sponsorship year. The also permanent residents have the opportunity to work, to attend school, to receive access to various social services that are provided for by the government to newcomers. And most importantly, permanent residents are required to pay taxes and respect all Canadian laws, whether they are municipal, provincial, or federal laws that are required to be observed diligently. Now, being a permanent resident does not necessarily guarantee you the opportunity to do all and every other thing, except there are certain things which permanent residents can be allowed to do, including, as I mentioned earlier on, the enjoyment of all the services that are provided for under the law. The exceptions are the opportunity to run for political office, which is something which is only the privy for Canadian citizens, those who have already become a Canadian citizen. Additional also, there are certain jobs that are provided for by the government of Canada, which permanent residents may not necessarily qualify to apply for because they require a high level of security clearance, and it's only available to Canadian citizens. Permanent residents do not have yet a Canadian passport. That is only possible once they have applied to become Canadian citizens, then they can qualify to be granted a Canadian passport. Generally, permanent residents hold their permanent resident status card, and in some situations, others may have foreign passports from their countries of origin. Um, the permanent resident status has to be maintained, especially um, if the person, the newcomer, chooses to travel outside Canada. That means you have to be able to maintain your status by living or by being present within Canada for a period of at least of 730 days, which is about 2.5 years out of a period of 5 years if you choose to move outside of Canada. That is to ensure that you still can retain your status and have access to the various guarantees provided for. However, if you stay beyond that, chances are that you may lose your permanent resident status, and you may have to reapply to reinstate, to be reinstated back to your permanent resident status. So that's something really important to keep in mind, but I'll talk about this when I speak about traveling outside of Canada in the slides that are to follow. Beyond your rights as a newcomer, you also have responsibilities. Um, these responsibilities include the opportunity for you as a newcomer to take very active steps to contribute towards your own settlement by finding ways and means in which you would take active steps towards integrating. These include either finding a job or employment opportunities. These can be survival jobs or things that you do to try to have a feel, a sense for how to earn a living here within Canada. Obviously, as a newcomer, also you have a responsibility to improve your language uh, level or skills if you need to upgrade. Yeah, if you are keen on working, it's important that you find opportunities to upgrade your resume, register with the settlement agents who can then connect you with the settlement counselors who can assist you to find work or employment opportunities. Um, Additionally, there are other services that are provided for newcomers through the settlement agencies. These are government funded uh, agencies to ensure that newcomers have access to services which will help them to begin to establish upon arrival in Canada. Um, Obviously, it's important that you work very closely with your sponsor. That can be your relative or your church community to ensure that you receive access to these services that are provided for. It's also important that as one of your responsibilities, which I mentioned earlier in the previous slides, that you obey the law. This country, Canada, is a country of rules and laws, and it's important that you ensure that you follow those laws. One particular aspect I would talk about includes issues regarding family, where you know how you treat your family members may be different in the countries where you may have previously come from. But in Canada, it's important that you treat your family members with respect, as well as also it's not allowed to beat or to spank children. Um, in those situations, if that were to occur, it's important that you engage and involve our office to ensure that we can provide uh, relevant intervention to ensure that nothing escalates. Otherwise, this could result in the committing of a crime which is against the law, and if such an offense were to occur, it could lead to serious repercussions, including jail time if upon conviction, as well as also upon serving of your time in penitentiary, resulting in initiation of proceedings that could lead to the revocation of your status as a permanent resident in Canada. So it's something which is serious, and this is one of your responsibilities that you need to ensure that you avoid getting in trouble with the law in Canada. Okay. Now, I indicated that I was going to speak about traveling outside of Canada. Newcomers have, as one of the rights granted to them as a permanent resident, the opportunity to be able to move within Canada. You can travel from one place to another within Canada, as well as also to be able to travel outside of Canada. However, we would strongly recommend that newcomers who have just been sponsored not travel outside of Canada before they receive their permanent resident cards, because that document is what you would need along with other additional documents that I'll mention shortly in order to be able to travel outside Canada. Once newcomers arrive in Canada, they're expected to stay within the community of settlement where they were destined to arrive to. If in the event that a newcomer chooses to move outside of their community of settlement, it's important that you inform your sponsor. In this case, our office needs to know whether this desire to move is for any number of reasons. It could be employment, perhaps it could be the desire to move closer to a place where your relatives are, if you discover that you have some relatives in Canada, or if it is something to do with maybe the opportunity to find housing, accommodation, that sort of thing. So it's important that we, your sponsors, know to ensure that we can make the necessary arrangements in line with the requirements of Immigration Canada so that we can meet the residency destination requirements for the newcomers. That is with regard to traveling within Canada. Now, if the newcomer decides to travel outside of Canada, it's important that, first of all, the newcomer understand that they cannot go back to the country where they fled from or their country of origin. And we would strongly discourage also the newcomer from going to the country of asylum where they were in refuge, as this has many consequences, as I will explain a little bit later. For newcomers to travel outside of Canada, first of all, the newcomers, since they are permanent residents, they need to apply for a travel document. And once they have received their travel document, they need to ensure that the country where they are traveling to is willing and able to accept permanent resident documents. Otherwise, the newcomer may need to apply for a visa in order to enter that country. Additionally, if the newcomer's flight has a stopover in another country, the newcomer will need to check with that country where they have a stopover, whether they need to apply for a transit visa also along the route, on their route to their final country of destination that they intend to travel to. So these are all important things to keep in mind before you decide to travel. And lastly, as I had indicated earlier, that as a permanent resident, you cannot leave outside of Canada for a period beyond 730 days, which is about 2.5 years, during any given period of 5 years. The intention of that is to ensure that you can still maintain and retain your status as a permanent resident. Obviously, once you leave Canada and stay beyond that, in some cases, especially in some provinces, you lose access to certain benefits. For example, in Ontario, you may not be allowed to have access to healthcare upon return. So this is something to keep in mind. So it's important that if you go outside of Canada, you come back as quickly as you can so that you can still maintain your status as a permanent resident. Additionally, when you travel outside Canada or away from your settlement community, your sponsors may cease to provide you financial support because you are no longer close to the intended place where you're supposed to stay. And therefore, your basic support needs that would be provided for by your sponsors will cease to be provided in that situation. So this is something to keep in mind because it can come as a shock, but it could result in the loss of support from your sponsors. And your sponsor has to also report these to Immigration Canada to ensure that they're aware of your whereabouts, especially during your period of settlement, the 12 months of your settlement period in Canada. Okay. Now, what are some of the things that you can expect from your sponsor? Generally, private sponsors provide support to you as a newcomer for a period of 12 months, or from the day when you arrived until the end of your sponsorship period. If, however, in between you become financially self-sufficient, meaning that you are able to provide for your needs in a month or expected on a monthly basis, you're able to finance it, then your sponsor may no longer provide you financial support, but will still continue to support you in other ways that are non-financial. The numerous things that your sponsors would provide, I will just highlight the major ones include housing to ensure that you have a place to stay. Your sponsor also will provide you information or to orient you about the use of different services within the community so that you can be able to manage your life, including banking, how to budget, how to open a bank account, learning about the currency system, etc., showing you how to use the public transit system or public transportation so that you can move around, showing you how to do grocery shopping, to ensure that you can do bargain shopping or to save and find discounts and so on and so forth, as well as also explaining the different rules or requirements within the country. The other aspect is healthcare. Obviously, once you arrive, you would have been issued what we call the Interim Federal Health Insurance Plan at the airport, or IFH. That is a health plan which provides you coverage for certain basic needs, including things like prescription drugs, eye care, for the duration of your sponsorship year. However, in the event that if you have not yet received your provincial health insurance plan, or HIP in the case of Ontario, the Ontario Health Insurance Plan, the IFH can provide coverage for that. So your sponsor is responsible to assist you to apply for these health documents to enable you to access health services in the event that you are unwell, you need to see a medical doctor or to visit a clinic, and also to follow up on any other health conditions that were identified and referred by Immigration Canada prior to your travel to Canada with your notice of arrival. Additionally, your sponsor also will assist you obtain certain important primary government documents, including your social insurance number, SIN. If the newcomer has family and children, the children would be assisted to apply for Canada Child Benefits. Is a government subsidy program to assist families to receive financial support to help them in managing um, the provision of um, services to the children so that they can raise their children with support from some government funds which are provided for that purpose. For newcomers who have certain medical conditions or have disabilities, the Ontario Disability Support Program is also available to help them meet some of their needs. And so the newcomers can be supported by their sponsor to apply for the Ontario Disability Support Program, or DSP. Newcomers also can upgrade their education, whether it is language classes or for children who are still going to school from kindergarten to high school. They can help them to enroll in schools. For the newcomers who are eager and willing to work and ready to work, your sponsors will assist you with the support of the settlement agencies who find opportunities for work or employment, or to upgrade your resumes and assess your skill levels and so on and so forth. Lastly, but not the least, your sponsors also will assist you in enrolling with settlement services, which provide various government programs for newcomers who have just arrived, so to ensure that they are supported and have the guidance that they need in the community where they're settling so that they can access the necessary government services that are provided to them. For newcomers who have language challenges, their sponsor will also arrange for maybe a translator or someone to interpret in the event that they need that if they don't speak English or French. So these are just a few things that your sponsors provide. But in summary or overall, your sponsors generally are responsible for providing for your basic needs, including food, accommodation, day-to-day living expenses, clothing, furniture, household goods, assisting you to have access to physicians, dentists, and enrolling children in school, and all the other things that I have mentioned. And of course, not forgetting to orient you around your community so that you know how to move and how to find your way within the community where you have settled. So these are some of the things that your sponsors do. Obviously, I cannot emphasize that it's important for you to work and cooperate very, very closely with your sponsor, because they know and are able to guide you in order to find the supports that you need during your period of sponsorship. Now, while your sponsor is able to provide all these services that I mentioned, it's important for the newcomer to know that the government of Canada has a responsibility to ensure that the sponsors are actually providing these services in accordance with the requirements they signed and undertook in the sponsorship agreement that they used for bringing you to Canada. Therefore, as such, it is our duty and our obligation as your sponsor in partnership with those that we partner to sponsor, whether it is your relative or it is the church community that is sponsoring you, to ensure that we monitor your progress during your year of sponsorship. Oftentimes, Immigration Canada may contact you, the newcomer, to find out how you are settling in, and they can conduct a survey. This survey may be an online survey, or it could be a phone call with the help of a translator in your local language to try to find out how you're settling. They may ask you some questions and have you answer those questions. Then they will review and assess those questions to determine whether they are in compliance with the supports that you're expected to be provided by your sponsor. Obviously, if there are gaps that have been identified during these surveys, then Immigration Canada will notify our office and ask us to provide a report um, proving that actually support has been provided to you. And if it is discovered that that support has not been provided, then we would be asked to fulfill that support that needs to be provided. Now, as a newcomer, it's important for you to know that this activity of completing a survey, a monitoring survey or a phone call from Immigration Canada is voluntary. There is no consequence in declining to participate in these surveys. However, we would still encourage you that if it is something you strongly believe that you can um, provide accurate information, that you consult with your sponsor before you undertake the opportunity to do so, to participate in those surveys, because eventually we would need to know what information you shared so that we can be able to address also any concerns that may arise out of that survey that would have been completed. Our office also undertakes our own survey for our newcomers who have been sponsored. We send out a Survey Monkey. This is an online survey during the second month of your sponsorship to ensure that the important supports that you need to receive are being provided by your sponsor, whether it is your relative, your friend, or it is the church group or the church community that is settling you for Project Hope cases. We strongly ask you that you complete that survey because it will help us to ensure that we can address any gaps or any shortfalls in support that you would be expected to be provided by your sponsor. So when you receive the survey from the Office for Refugees of the Archdiocese of Toronto, please complete it and send it to us as soon as you have received it, so that we can be able to review and then assess if there's a need to provide additional support to you or to address any gaps that would have been identified in that survey. Okay. Now, I have already mentioned a little bit about the support that you receive, where it comes from. When it comes to the financial support that you receive, obviously you are, for those who are sponsored by their relatives, other friends, your relatives and friends are responsible for ensuring that they have provided that financial support to you. Monies for your sponsorship would have been deposited with our office in trust at the time when your sponsorship application was submitted for processing, and those monies would be released to you in installments every 3 months to ensure that you are able to meet your day-to-day needs, including paying for your rent, your food, your transportation, monthly passes or bus pass, your telephone bills, and things like that. So this is very, very important because this support is coming from your relative or your friends who are responsible for sponsoring you. In the case of newcomers who are sponsored directly by our office through Project Hope, the money, the support that you are receiving is through monies that have been donated by members of the church communities within the Archdiocese of Toronto or well-wishers, which has then been pulled together to be able to provide for your support on a day-to-day basis to ensure that you are able to meet your daily needs. Therefore, because we are responsible for your settlement during the first year, we do not expect you, the newcomer, to pay back your sponsors or your church groups or your relatives any money that you receive from them, because that is a responsibility they had committed to with the government of Canada to ensure that they provide you financial support during your first year. However, it's also important for you to know or to be aware that when you begin to work, or if you are beginning to earn income through employment, we would review the support that is provided to you to ensure that the support that you're being provided is in line with the guidelines provided for by Immigration Canada, so that that support is consistent, and also you'll be able to manage even beyond after the end of your sponsorship year. Additionally, for the newcomers who are sponsored through Project Hope, because the funds that are provided to you are donations through parishioners and so on, so we would try to be as prudent as possible to minimize costs and expenses by providing other supports through in-kind items, which will ensure that instead of buying physically the things that you need, some of these things can already be provided through in-kind donations that are made available through well-wishers and people who have extra to provide. These can include things like maybe free accommodation for the whole duration of your sponsorship year. It could be, furniture, brand new or fairly new. Could be clothing and any other items that are donated to assist you to reduce on the cost of sponsorship. All of that is important because it helps you to have a foundational beginning so that you can build upon it, and then any additional things that you need you can buy later on when you're able to earn significantly more money from employment or work that you have found during the year of your sponsorship. Additionally, for newcomers who have families, they may receive certain benefits from government programs that are intended to also to provide them financial support to help them with raising their families, especially children. You would receive probably the Canada Child Benefit, what we call CCCB. It's a government subsidy program intended for parents to assist them with providing for the needs of their children. So where the budget for your financial support that has been provided to you by your sponsor is not sufficient enough to cover all the other expenses, families with children can use their Canada Child Benefits from the government to supplement or to buy some of the things which may not be provided for in the budget according to Immigration Canada requirements. So feel free to do that because that is your money and intended to help you in raising your family and meeting their needs. Additionally, for those who have family members, or if you're a newcomer with disabilities, you may receive, if approved, upon applying, disability support benefits from the government of Ontario. That money is intended to help you to meet your day-to-day needs provided for by that. Newcomers or refugees who arrive in Canada with personal assets can also use their assets that they have brought with them towards supporting themselves, as you would in any normal situation where you have your own money. However, I will explain a little bit about how that can work in terms of newcomers who come with significant personal assets. If the amount is fairly significant, uh, um, Immigration Canada may allow for the sponsor to ask the newcomer to use a portion of that towards their monthly supports and needs as well. And I already talked about employment. So if the newcomer is working, we would also expect that if the income they're earning is fairly significant and more than a certain threshold that has been defined by Immigration Canada, that they can begin to contribute to their day-to-day needs as stipulated in their budget. It's very important to know or to be told that newcomers cannot qualify to apply for social assistance during their first year of sponsorship because they are still under sponsorship. And sponsorship means that the newcomer is being supported by their sponsor for a period of 1 year. And so if a newcomer were to choose to apply for social assistance, the government would still refer them back to their sponsor to indicate that they are still under sponsorship and their support would be coming directly from their either relative or church group that is sponsoring them. The other source of financial support, which I mentioned earlier, is the personal assets. So for newcomers who come to Canada with significant personal assets, these are financial resources which have value. Once upon arrival to Canada at the airport, you declare them. The newcomers can use a portion of that towards supporting themselves. For example, if you are a single individual who has arrived in Canada, if you brought with you, say, 10,000 Canadian dollars, you would be allowed to retain 5,000 of the 10,000 that you have brought, and the other 5,000 that is over the limit allowed for you to retain, your sponsor can ask you to utilize that to meet part of your day-to-day needs as well. And if it is a couple who has arrived in Canada and has brought with them significant assets, for example, again, if the couple has brought with them 10,000, they are allowed to retain 7,500 of that amount, and the remaining 2,500 they can apply it to their budget, their monthly budget, to meet some of their day-to-day needs, and so on and so forth. So this is how that calculation works. I talked about newcomers who are working and how that may impact the financial support they receive on a monthly basis. Once the newcomer starts working and they're earning an income, it is expected that if the income they're earning is more than the monthly budget that would be provided to them by their sponsor, um, the sponsor can review their budget and discuss ways in which to begin to ask the newcomer to contribute to their own support. There's a formula that has been provided for by Immigration Canada, allowing for the newcomer to be able to receive sufficient support during the month, even if they are working. But if the amount that they're earning is more than a certain threshold, for example, if a newcomer, let's say a single individual was working and their monthly support budget from their sponsor is 1,000, and the newcomer is working and they started earning, and maybe in a month they're earning 500, then it would be important that the newcomer informs their sponsor and they will review their budget. In this situation, because the amount that the newcomer is earning is not more than what they would receive per month, or it is less than the stipulated amount that they would receive in a month, their sponsor may not reduce the amount of support provided to them. But if the newcomer was working and earning, say in a month, they were earning 1,500, but the monthly budget that is provided to them is, let's say, 1,000, then it means the newcomer is earning 500 more than the budget support that they are being provided. So therefore, their sponsor may sit down to review their monthly budget and may make a deduction, um, the equivalent of the amount which is over and above the budget that they would be receiving in a month. And so a portion of that money then would be saved for a later day if the need arises for the sponsor to provide that, while the newcomer can continue to utilize what they're earning to support themselves. In the case of Project Hope cases, we definitely would review these earnings to ensure that any funds which are over and above the required allowable maximums that are provided for by Immigration Canada, we can make those deductions so that those funds can be used to help to sponsor other refugees who have no relatives or friends in Canada that would also benefit from these additional funds that have been saved, given that the newcomer now is able to provide for their day-to-day needs through employment. However, if the newcomer loses their job, they are still going to be supported at the same level as they were initially under sponsorship. So therefore, they don't need to be worried about what happens if I lose my job. Will I still receive support? Yes, you will be provided support at the same level as if when you were still not working. So your sponsor is there for you for the duration of your sponsorship period, which is 12 months. So don't be afraid. Feel free to continue working if you can, and if you lose your job, um, your sponsor will always step in to ensure that your support is restored to the original level as if you were um, not employed at the time. Okay. Now, in any situation, as I indicated, sometimes we have disagreements which can arise between the newcomer and their sponsor uh, for any number of causes. However, what we would ask that is important if such a situation arises, please contact our office so that we are fully aware and updated, and we can ensure that we can find a way to find a resolution to the situation. We would ask that if the conflict is between or amongst the newcomers themselves, that the sponsor, you inform your sponsor so that they're aware, and their sponsor will inform our office so that also we become aware. However, if the conflict is between the newcomer and their co-sponsor or their relative, then it would be important that the co-sponsor or the relative contact our office to allow us to intervene and to see if we could find a resolution to the situation. However, if no resolution is found, then it's important that we inform Immigration Canada so that they can either find a mediator to assist to mediate in the situation. And if in that situation also it is found that there is no possibility to resolve the issue, then Immigration Canada may declare what we call a breakdown. And that breakdown is basically a condition whereby there is no possibility of reconciling the parties who have had a disagreement. And unfortunately, when a breakdown is declared, Immigration Canada can find fault either with the sponsor or with the newcomer. If fault is found with the newcomer, unfortunately, the newcomer will cease to um, be provided support by their sponsor. They will be on their own. They can either be referred to um, government welfare programs, or in some situations, probably government may um, determine that the newcomer um, does not qualify for that, and they may have to um, fend for themselves for the remaining period of their sponsorship, especially if it involves a family and the dispute is between amongst the family, and the larger part of the family ends up being supported by the sponsor. The smaller unit of the family will have to be separated, and therefore they have to be on their own. So it's very serious. We take it very, very seriously, and we strongly encourage that if such a situation arises, you immediately contact our office so that we can investigate and work to resolve the issue as quickly as possible. And we can document it and inform Immigration Canada about the situation. Lastly, there are certain important documents which all newcomers need to be aware about and need to be able to have in their possession. That includes the confirmation of permanent residence, which is a document that is issued to them upon arrival at the point of entry in the airport. Um, Make sure that you keep this document very safe, because it is the document that you'll need when you'll be applying for your Canadian citizenship. As well, it's also required in many other government services to provide proof of your status as a permanent resident. Additional also, when you apply for your old age security pensions, at time of your retirement, um, you may be asked to provide this document to show proof to the government that you have actually been living within the country as a resident. The other document is the permanent resident card, which you will receive few months after you've arrived in Canada. The permanent resident card is a document that replaces your confirmation of permanent resident document, and you can use it as an official government ID. The permanent resident card is usually sent to your mailing address, your Canadian mailing address. So therefore, it's important that when you arrive at the airport, you provide, or you provided the immigration officer with a mailing address where your permanent resident card can be mailed. If that was not done, we would ask that you speak to your sponsor to update your Canadian mailing address online, so that Immigration Canada has your Canadian mailing address in order to send your permanent resident card. Okay. Also, you need to have a social insurance number. Previously, social insurance numbers were issued at the airport, but during COVID, that is no longer the case. However, in exceptional situations, sometimes they can still process social insurance numbers at the airport upon arrival if there are not as many flights landing at the same time. But your sponsors need to assist you to apply for the social insurance number, because it's the document which is issued by the government of Canada to allow you to be able to work in Canada. Every family member needs to have their own social insurance number. It's a personal identification number, which is like a data bank for all your personal information. And do not share your personal social insurance number with anyone at all, to avoid um, theft of your identity and your personal information. If possible, we would encourage that you memorize your personal social insurance number and not carry that piece of document with you, because if you lose it, it could have serious consequences in terms of your compromising your personal identity and information. Service Canada is where you apply for the social insurance number. Um, Also, newcomers need to apply for Ontario Health Insurance Plan. I mentioned this in the previous slides. Um, this is the provincial health insurance plan, which allows you to be able to access medical services across the province. It allows you to see a doctor. Each time you see a doctor, you need to present your OHIP card. As well, also, the OHIP card allows you to receive um, whenever you go to the hospital and you need to receive services, or you go to a walk-in clinic or a family doctor and so on and so forth, you need to present your OHIP card. You have also been issued an interim federal health insurance plan. That is a federal health program provided for by the government of Canada. This only is active for a period of 1 year or during your sponsorship year, and it provides additional health coverage on top of your provincial health insurance. This coverage is for supplemental benefits, which include things like emergency dental services or dental care, prescription drugs, or eyeglasses that you might need. And so this document is very important that you know how to use it. It is administered by Medvedev Blue Cross, but there's a number behind the document which you can always call if you do not know whether a service you are trying to access is covered. You can call in advance to ask them to confirm whether that service is covered or not, so that you can be able to have it covered for. So please make use of that. At the end of your sponsorship year, the interim federal health plan, IFH, will expire. So use it to the best of your ability within the period of your sponsorship to access those services. Additionally, newcomers also will have received a travel loan, which was issued to them at the time of their immigration interview. They signed a document. That was a loan granted by the government of Canada to cover their airfare and medical examinations during their application process. In some countries, for example, Israel, newcomers do not receive a travel loan because the government of Israel pays and covers for the travel expenses for the newcomers. Therefore, those newcomers who came from Israel may not receive a travel loan document for that reason. It is the responsibility of the newcomer to pay back their travel loan, not the sponsor, as this is an agreement between the newcomer and the government of Canada. The newcomers can do this through either income that they have earned from work or employment, or if they have another source of support that they can be able to use that, but not from the monies that are provided to them by their sponsors to pay their travel loan. Now, there's a grace period within which the newcomers cannot be required to pay their travel loan. The government has made some changes, allowing for a period of at least 1 year after the arrival of the newcomer not to pay the travel loan. So in the second year of sponsorship, the newcomer can begin to make arrangements to pay the travel loan. And I will talk about this in the next slide or the subsequent slide in terms of how you can contact Immigration Canada if you choose to begin to make arrangements to pay your travel loan. We also encourage newcomers, if possible, to apply for a driver's license because some employers may need that the newcomers have a driving license in Canada. So if the newcomers have come to Canada with a driving license from another country or from a country where they came from, they can take that to the driving license center to have it evaluated, and it may help them to um, acquire their Canadian driver's license. Obviously, this has a fee attached to it, so you may need to consider that as you look at your budget to see whether that's something you can afford as the newcomer. Um, some sponsors may consider covering it for you, but it's not a requirement that they do so. We also encourage newcomers to apply for public library card. Public library cards are free. These are provided by the public libraries within the Greater Toronto area. Each region may have its own public library. So go to the public library and apply for one. Libraries provide any number of services and resources, including books, movies, access to computers, internet, free internet or Wi-Fi, as well as also language lessons and so on, after school classes or services for children. So this would be of much help, especially for those families that have children and also maybe are trying to look for ways to be engaged in the community. You can go to the nearest public library branch in your area to apply um, a public library. The public libraries also provide what we call as a museum and arts pass, which is given to the newcomers to allow them to be able to access free attractions. You can go to various attractions within the city, like the Toronto Zoo, um, the the Royal Ontario Museum, the Art Gallery of Ontario, and many other places which usually visitors to it would need to pay in order to access, but this is provided free. If you go to the public library to apply for a public library card, you may be provided information about how to get access to this free pass for attractions that are available within the city. Okay. Now, here is a sample of some of the documents which I talked about. So you would have seen this when you arrived. This is what the confirmation of permanent resident document looks like when you landed at the airport. It's important that you retain this document very securely. If possible, make photocopies and keep the original in in a safe place so that it's not destroyed, because you'll need it when you apply for your Canadian citizenship. The permanent resident card looks like this. This is a sample. It's a proof of your legal status in Canada as a resident, and you can carry it as also an official identification document with you. The Ontario Health Insurance Plan, this is what it looks like. The interim federal health certificate, also this is what it looks like. And as I said, at the back, there's a number that you can call if you need to know whether the service you want to access is covered by it. Okay. And this is what the social insurance number looks like. Now, the social insurance number in the past used to be a plastic, but now it's just a piece of paper with a number, a 9-digit number that is written on it. As I said previously, please protect it very, very carefully. Do not share it with anyone. Make sure that the only people that you can share your social insurance number, if asked, are your employer, if you have found a job and your employer therefore needs to register you for payroll so that they can provide your payments. You also can provide your social insurance number when you're filing your taxes in Canada. All Canadians, whether you're permanent resident or a Canadian citizen, you're expected to file taxes. So you need to provide your social insurance number to Revenue Canada. Also, when you're opening a bank account, the bank may ask you to provide your social insurance number to them in order to open the bank account. For families or newcomers who have families and children, when you apply for the Canada Child Benefits, you will be asked to provide your social insurance number. And for families who have children who are attending either college or university, if they choose to apply for student loans, they will be asked also to provide their social insurance number. Therefore, it's important that you know who you can provide your social insurance number. Beyond that, please do not share your social insurance number, whether it is for purposes of renting a place. Some landlords may ask for a copy of your social insurance number. Please do not do that. That's not necessary by law. In some situations, if you're applying for a telephone plan, some companies may ask for a social insurance number. Please do not give them because that's not necessary. You don't need that in order to obtain a phone plan. Okay. And do not share your social insurance number with anyone at all. Just keep it to yourself. Other key documents that you can consider, I already talked about the driver's license and the public library card. Please consider also an Ontario photo ID. If your permanent resident card has not yet arrived, you can apply for an Ontario ID, which is a document which can act as a piece of identification you can use to identify yourself. There's a cost to making to applying for the Ontario photo ID. I think it's about $35 currently, but it's a good piece of document to have. If you do not have your permanent resident card yet, it can serve as such. Okay. Lastly, I spoke about the travel loan, how you can contact Immigration Canada in the event that you feel that you have the ability to begin to pay back the loan. Generally, the loan payment period only starts after the end of your sponsorship year or after 1 year. But if in between you are working and you're earning enough money, you think that you can start to pay back your loan, you can call either the toll-free number 1-800-667-7301, or you can fax a request to the fax number provided there, 819-934-3884. Or I would probably prefer that you send an email to collection@cic.gc.ca, whereby you can request information about your immigration travel loan. You would need to provide your application file number, your G number, so that they know who the person who is requesting this information is. Okay. Again, as I mentioned, it's not the responsibility of your sponsor to cover the costs of your immigration loan. Finally, in situations where you encounter an emergency, we strongly encourage you to be aware that you can always contact or you can call the 911 number, which is the emergency line in Canada used for any emergency, including primarily if there's fire. So for fire services, you can call 911. Or if there's a health situation, a health condition, a member of your family has fallen sick or is having a heart attack or stroke, please call the 911 number and you will receive help from the 911 person who receives the call to send a medical help. Or if there's a situation where there's a crime, you need the presence of police to come and intervene, You can also call 911 and they will send the police to assist you. Again, just a reminder, as I mentioned, if you call a victim of fraud, whereby perhaps you unfortunately were conned of your information, or you are not sure um, that someone who has you have provided your information may be fraudulent, then you can call the fraud line, which is 1-888-495-8501. Please be aware that there are people who are trying to scam you for your information continuously, especially newcomers. Sometimes it can be a phone call, someone pretending to be calling from a government office or a government agency and asking you to provide your personal information, whether it's your phone number, your address, or your social insurance number, or your bank account information. Please be very careful and do not share your information without people to people that you do not know. It's a very, very common thing, so be careful. But in the event that that has happened to you and you realize it later, please make sure to inform your sponsor and also call the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center, the number which is provided here in the screen, so that you can receive help in terms of the steps you need to take in order to prevent your information from being used to defraud you. Lastly, I want to congratulate you for coming to Canada after a very long period of waiting for your process to be completed and concluded. Now that you're here, we want to wish you well, and please contact our office if you have any questions, if you need help, or if you have anything at all that relates to your settlement that you need clarified. Feel free to write us at outreach@toronto.org, or call our emergency helpline, which is the main office line, 647-494-5419. Again, 647-494-5419. And we are located at 830 Bathurst Street, Suite 104 in Toronto, Ontario. Our postal code is M5R3G1. Thank you for participating and listening to this session. I wish you all the best with your sponsorship, and we look forward to a day when your sponsorship has ended and you also are contributing to the country and the community where you have settled. Thank you.